I think they have to become the 51st state. I think we're going to have to keep it for the 51st state. I call him Governor Trudeau.
Mr. Trump is a bully, and you do not give 1 inch to a bully. In that case, we cannot be learning this on the job.
Have you ever wondered just how fragile international alliances really are? One moment, nations are best friends, and the next, they're rethinking everything. For years, Canada has been deeply tied to the United States, commercially, economically, even culturally. Hundreds of billions of dollars flow between the two countries every year. Their supply chains are practically woven together. But when the US slapped 25% tariffs on $155 billion worth of goods, something interesting happened. Instead of weakening Canada, the move actually boosted its GDP by up to 7%. That's over $200 billion a year. And now, Canada's leaders seem to be rethinking their loyalty. At the European Council and the European Commission, discussions have ramped up about deepening ties and pushing forward the CETA free trade agreement with Ottawa. Meanwhile, rising protectionist policies, tariffs, and diplomatic tensions with the US are pushing Canada to search for new markets. A backup plan, so to speak. One particularly intriguing option, the Kanzuk Project. It's a vision that would see Canada pivot towards the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, strengthening trade with nations that share a historical and cultural bond. Some are even suggesting it could become Canada's preferred economic alliance over the United States. But what exactly is Kanzuk? Why would Canada take such a drastic step? And where does the European Union fit into all of this? As we unpack these questions, we'll also take a deeper look at the shifting dynamics between Canada and the UK, and how Canada's frustration with US trade disputes like Trump-era steel and aluminum tariffs might be accelerating this shift. But Canada's shift away from the US isn't just talk. It's already in motion. USMCA negotiations, Buy America policies, and ongoing trade disputes over everything from wood products to dairy have forced Canadian businesses and politicians to start considering Plan B. And that plan, expanding deeper into European and UK markets. Even before Brexit, Canada had strong trade ties with the United Kingdom as part of the European Union. But when the UK left the EU, a major risk emerged, losing that trade connection altogether. To prevent that, Canada quickly negotiated a new agreement, ensuring business would continue as usual. Now, a growing number of Canadians are asking, why even bother with the US anymore? The European Union and the UK are massive markets, with fewer political risks and fewer unpredictable trade barriers. Former Canadian MP and current High Commissioner to the UK, Ralph Goodale, has been vocal about this shift. As Canada braces for more US tariffs under Trump's policies, Goodale believes strengthening trade relationships elsewhere is no longer just an option. It's a necessity. According to him, Canada needs to go further, push harder, and secure every trade and market opportunity available. And the numbers speak for themselves. Canada's trade relationship with the UK alone is worth $500 billion, with 10% being direct bilateral trade. Thanks to a robust free trade agreement finalized post-Brexit in spring 2021, Canada and the UK now enjoy 99% duty-free and quota-free access for two-way trade. So, with all of this in place, is Canada truly preparing to break away from the US as its primary economic partner? The United Kingdom and Canada, two countries that trust each other, work well together, and most importantly, do excellent business. Sure, the US market is big, close, and familiar, but as Ralph Goodale puts it, Canada's trade with the UK is only going to grow. just like it did with the United States. It's the path of least resistance. But why stop there? Trade diversification isn't just smart, it's essential. Canada is already moving beyond the US, building new agreements that expand its economic footprint globally. Goodale points out a critical fact. Canada already has 15 trade agreements covering 51 countries, giving it access to 2/3 of the world's GDP. And in the post-Brexit era, Canada and the UK are getting even closer. Once the UK left the European Union, it rushed to secure its own trade deals, and one of its biggest priorities? A comprehensive free trade agreement with Canada. This deal is based on the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, an agreement that originally covered both Canada and the UK when Britain was still part of the EU. Now, after Brexit, the UK wants to keep that agreement, but on its own terms. As negotiations accelerate, temporary agreements are keeping trade smooth and uninterrupted, and the announcement of a 99% duty-free trade regime. That's raising eyebrows globally. For Canada, this isn't just another trade deal. It's a chance to diversify exports, reduce dependence on the US, and tap into new opportunities. And for the UK, finding strong global partners after Brexit is a matter of survival. With all this in motion, could Commonwealth ties between Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand be the new economic powerhouse of the future? What makes Canada and the United Kingdom such natural partners? A shared language, a similar legal system, Westminster-style governance, and even the symbolic connection to the Crown. These common threads fuel the growing interest in CANZUK, a potential alliance between Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. Supporters of CANZUK dream big, a union with free trade, open borders, common passports, and even synchronized foreign policies. The idea of a powerful economic and geopolitical bloc is tempting, but how realistic is it? For now, concrete steps are still unclear. However, the trade deal between Canada and the UK could be the first stage of something bigger. So, could Canada actually shift its focus away from the United States and fully embrace Europe, the UK, and the Asia-Pacific? Realistically, not overnight. The Canadian economy is deeply tied to the United States, a 9,000-kilometer border, intricate supply chains through NAFTA, now USMCA, and strong cultural connections mean that Ottawa won't just pack its bags and walk away. But here's the catch. Trade tensions are shifting perspectives. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, threats to automotive trade, and repeated clashes over dairy products have fueled Canada's "let's not put all our eggs in one basket" mentality. As a result, Canada is aggressively expanding its reach, strengthening exports to the European Union through CETA, negotiating a new free trade agreement with the UK seeking closer ties with Japan, South Korea, and ASEAN nations. On one hand, Canada's trade deal with the EU remains strong, allowing duty-free or low-tariff access to European markets. On the other, Brexit has complicated things. Before, Canadian goods flowed smoothly between the UK and the EU under one framework. Now they're split between two separate trade agreements. If Canada can successfully finalize its UK deal, it can clearly separate these markets again, minimizing customs barriers on both sides. Distance, of course, is a factor. Europe and Britain are far from Canada, and transportation costs can be high. But in an era where global trade is becoming digital, logistics are evolving. Physical distance may not matter as much as it used to. If CANZUK ever becomes a reality, it would form a 130 million-person economic bloc, with a GDP between $6 and $7 trillion, a force to be reckoned with. Proponents argue that these countries, unlike the European Union, share stronger cultural and legal ties, making them a more natural fit. But is this just wishful thinking? Or could this alliance truly reshape global trade? Is the dream of Kanzuk too good to be true? Critics certainly think so. They point out the glaring obstacles: geographical distance, economic differences, conflicting immigration policies, and diverging strategic priorities. Let's break it down. Australia and New Zealand. Their focus is locked onto Asia-Pacific trade. The UK? It's busy untangling its post-Brexit diplomacy with Europe. Canada? Fully integrated into the United States economy, with trade routes carved deep into North America. The idea of a unified confederation? A long shot. But what about a looser framework? Free trade, free movement, high-level coordination. Now let's be realistic. Canada can't just walk away from the US overnight. A huge consumer market sits just across the border. NAFTA, USMCA, cultural ties, deep supply chains, none of this disappears with the snap of a finger. But here's the twist. Canada also can't afford to be entirely dependent on the US. Why? Trade tensions, tariffs on steel, auto parts, dairy disputes. These constant frictions with Washington are pushing exporters to look elsewhere. And that's where Europe and the UK come in. Enter maybe Kanzuk, not a full-blown union, but a strategic alignment. Think, high-level cooperation, streamlined trade policies, stronger Commonwealth connections. Geography is an issue, but let's not forget, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are strikingly similar.
European.
Vast lands, low population density, resource-rich economies, English-speaking, legal and political commonalities. So why might Canada welcome this shift? First, exporters are fed up with US protectionism and want new markets. Second, Europe and the UK impose fewer trade barriers than the US. Third, Canada sees itself as a peaceful, multicultural bridge to the world. And fourth, well, Commonwealth ties still count for something. Could this be the dawn of a new trade era, or is it just another political fantasy? Canada already has a deal with the European Union through CETA, but in today's unpredictable trade world, having just one backup plan is like skydiving with a single parachute. Risky, to say the least. A separate UK agreement and fresh deals with Australia and New Zealand could give Canada more room to maneuver. And let's not forget the ongoing US drama: tariffs, protectionist policies, trade disputes. Canada's ace up its sleeve? I can always send my exports elsewhere. It's not cutting ties with the US, but it's a clear warning shot. Meanwhile, the European Union is keeping an eye on things. Confident in its own market power, it assumes Canada won't stray too far. The United Kingdom? It's still scrambling post-Brexit, trying to piece together lost trade agreements, which ironically puts Canada in a very favorable position. But where does this all lead? Will Canada be the mastermind behind a new Kanzuk trade alliance, or will this just be a scattered collection of side deals? One thing is certain: Canada wants options. Stable, predictable trade partners sound a lot better than navigating Washington's mood swings. So, what's the reality here? Let's not kid ourselves. A full split from the US is impossible. Geography and economics make sure of that. But Canada's leadership is sending a clear message. We're not just sitting ducks. We have alternatives. If the 99% duty-free deal with the UK gets finalized, that's a huge shift. If Australia and New Zealand jump on board, Kanzuk might stop being just an idea and start becoming an economic force. At best, Canada becomes more resilient against US trade pressure. At worst, it remains locked into its biggest trade relationship, but at least with more bargaining power. But let's leave on this thought. Is Canada truly on the verge of economic independence, or is this just diplomatic smoke and mirrors? Will the EU embrace a stronger Canada-UK bond or see it as competition? The future of global trade is unfolding before our eyes, and if there's one thing we know, Canada isn't waiting for permission to make its next move. We'll be watching how this plays out. So subscribe, hit the bell icon, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.